Hi, folks, and welcome to another episode of Careers and Coffee. So this week we themed it on the judiciary and law and judges, and today is no different. So on Tuesday we had Lord Hamlin, Supreme Court Justice, and today we've got a variety of different judges joining us for a panel debate to talk about their careers. So let's bring them all on to talk a little bit more about what they do. Good afternoon, folks. How are you all doing?
Good. Hi, Jordan.
Hello.
Nice to be joined by some very smiley faces today. Now, who should we kick off with? Blimey, Ibrahim, why don't we kick off with you? What do you do? Tell us a little bit more.
Well, afternoon, everybody. I'm Ibrahim Ilyas. I'm a magistrate at Birmingham Magistrates Court, and I'm not sitting as a magistrate. I'm a law student.
Fantastic. Who wants to go next?
Well,
I'll go next. Hello, I'm Debbie Stringer. I'm a district judge, which is in the county court in the West Midlands. And when I'm not being a district judge, I do a lot of sleeping because it's really tiring work.
Carol, you going to say something?
Hello, everybody. I'm an employment judge, and we hear all sorts of cases about discrimination, unfair dismissal and redundancy. And I'm also the manager for the region that I work in, which is in East London.
And I'm Sarah. I am a circuit judge. I'm peripatetic, so I cover all the county courts in Kent, Surrey and Sussex. And I do civil law, so I hear appeals from district judges like Debbie, and I try the more valuable and more complicated civil cases that don't go up to the High Court.
Fantastic. Thank you, folks. Now, can one of you tell me what an average day tends to look like?
There's no such thing as an average day, to be honest. Well, usually, if I go through mine, usually I start early, about 8 o'clock. And I've normally got a stack of files to look through where people have made different applications. If I've got a hearing, I have to prepare for the hearing, which starts at 10 o'clock, make sure that I've got all of the papers. Because I manage as well, my office is like a train station with different people coming in with different questions about the management of the region or something to do with national management. And most weeks I have up to about 5 meetings on various matters. And then I have to write up judgments on top. So, and if I'm lucky, I get to leave here at about 7 o'clock.
Crikey, that's a busy day.
Busy, yes.
I want to move on to Ibrahim. So you're a magistrate. So tell us a little bit about the difference between a magistrate and some of your colleagues on screen today.
Sure. So the main difference really is that I do this in a voluntary capacity. All my colleagues are paid, and being a magistrate is actually an unpaid voluntary position. We are sort of volunteer judges, so we do this alongside either a career, could be anything, a teacher, a nurse, etc., or indeed, people who are retired and they want to do something in the community. Then this is also a role for them.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, how many hours per month, roughly, do you think you spend volunteering as a magistrate?
Well, it can vary. I mean, there's a sort of yearly a target of how many sort of sittings you should do. I believe it's around 13 full days per year. But of course, because our sort of sittings are very flexible and we get our rota in advance, we can absolutely fit it around other commitments, whether it's for me like studying or if it's a full-time job. It's very much flexible. Yeah.
Excellent.
We enormously value people like Ibrahim who volunteer their time and really help keep the magistrates' courts running. We couldn't provide the service we do without people like Ibrahim. They're really critical, so don't think that because he's a volunteer he's not important. He's a vital part of the machinery.
Thank you.
That's fantastic.
I would
Thank you. And I was
echo
going to say, oh yeah, go on.
No, I would echo that because I do civil and family work. And a lot of the time that people will come in contact with the county court and the magistrates court is over disputes about their children. And the magistrates conduct 80% of the work relating to private law, so which is an enormous amount. Private law is if like two parents split up and they can't decide where the children should live or how much time they should spend with each other. Then the court will have to decide, and the magistrates court decide 80% of those cases. and 20% of the public law cases, and they are all unpaid volunteers, and absolutely the system could not function without them. So thank you to them and to Ibrahim and all of his colleagues.
That's excellent. Thank you. And just on that, I think volunteering is so important. We need to get more young people doing it. You know, Ibrahim, why do you think more young people should be volunteering? Not necessarily just as a magistrate, but, you know, why should they? And I suppose what sort of skills do you get out of it? Because no doubt this will enhance your studies at the moment.
Well, I think on the why question, I think I believed for quite some time now that life is more than just about having a job and earning. I think we should all have a very community, society-centered mindset. If we are to make life a lot more positive for everybody to live in all aspects, then we should look beyond our various careers and think about ways that we can get involved in the community, not just, for example, volunteering as a magistrate, whether it's assisting with a charity, assisting the NHS in what is a very crucial time, whether it's being a volunteer vaccinator, etc. So many opportunities out there for young people to get involved and to really help further build the nation up and improve. In terms of skills, I think one of the skills that are really important, particularly for young people, is having that kind of drive for self-improvement. It's something that I always tell students whenever I have a talk like this. And I remind them that actually, even if they're successful in a certain opportunity, as an example, a job interview, even if you're successful, still ask for feedback. Because not only does that make you stand out, but I think it'll help improve you in terms of performance. In the long run, it'll help you become a better person. And there's always room for improvement, and we can always become better people, I think. So I think that's definitely a skill that fellow young people could take on board.
Good answer. Very good answer. My next question for you all is around pathways. How, and I suppose rewinding the clock a little bit, did you all, when you're at school, think, I'm going to be a judge in the future? Or has this been something that's developed over time? And also, how do you become a judge? You know, what's the route into it? Who wants to kick off with that?
Well, I'll start. I'll start first. Well, I went to school, and I don't know reason why, but I've always wanted to be a solicitor. And when I was at school, the careers officer didn't think that was a good idea, that she thought I'd make a really good typist. So I really had to find my own pathway. And I didn't intend to be a judge at all. I did become a solicitor. I didn't intend to be a judge until one day I had a really bad experience of a judge in an employment tribunal, because that was my speciality then. And I was so incensed, I thought, well, I could do better than that. And that's what led me to becoming an employment judge. And now I'm a judge manager, and I make sure that all of my judges, I hope, are the sorts of judges I would like people to come up against.
I thought law was really boring. I was about 14 years old when I went to a careers talk at the school I went to. I grew up in Coventry, and I went to my local comprehensive, and the local solicitor came in, and after about half an hour I decided that law was probably the most boring thing that anybody could ever do, and there would be no way that I would ever study or consider a career in law. And then my parents got divorced, and that sort of changed my view, and I went off to become a barrister, and I had no aspiration to be a judge. And I'll be honest, I knew embarrassingly little about who judges were and how they were appointed. And it was only when a colleague said to me, have you thought about doing this? You'd be quite good, that I even looked into it.
Sadly, I've got a similar story. I watched Crown Court was on telly when I was at school, and I used to watch it sometimes, and I wanted to do law, and the careers officer said that he thought I'd make a good secretary.
It's still happening.
Still happening. I mean, I'm 47, and I went home. I was the first person in my whole family to go to university. I'm from Birmingham, and I went home and I was incensed. And I said to my dad, like this careers officer said that I can't be a solicitor, but I could be a secretary. And my dad said, I think that you'd be quite a good secretary there, Dad. I was fuming. And then my dad said, but to be fair, Dad, if Margaret Thatcher, she's a woman, she can be a prime minister, then you can be a solicitor, because you're equally as mouthy as she is. So eventually off I went to university, and then I did my law degree, did my postgrad, and I was a solicitor working some of the time for the local authority, but I've always done a lot of teaching alongside, and I still do. I teach for the Judicial College. And I hadn't even considered a career in the judiciary, and I was being very much pushed to be promoted at the Open University, which is where I was working at the time. And I didn't want to because it seemed not to suit me. And a friend of mine said, well, why don't you think about tribunals? So I applied, got it, and thought, actually, I'm okay at this. And then applied to be a deputy district judge and then a full-time district judge. But it was not something that even entered my head until about 8 years ago, when I first made my application. I thought that judges were sort of middle-aged old men, really, old men who went to posh schools, not me. But I'm glad I did it because it's a fabulous job. I really like it.
That's fantastic. And Ibrahim, how did you become a magistrate?
Well, I was first exposed to the law in secondary school when I attended my local Crown Court, which also happens to be just opposite to where I sit. Memories, and I remember speaking to a judge and a couple of barristers, and I thought this is something I definitely want to get involved in later on in life. And then when I did A-levels, I was researching about ways in which I could not only get some experience in law, but give back to the community in a small way. And when I came up with this role of a magistrate, I thought, what an amazing opportunity. The best of both worlds, helping and supporting the justice system whilst doing something for the community. And it's a very, very unique role because I'm yet to find really a country that has the involvement of lay normal people who are critical members of the judiciary making very important decisions. It's a very, very unique institution, and I'm really proud to be a part of it.
In the employment tribunal, all of the judges sit with 2 lay members on the most important discrimination cases as well. And I know that in the appeal jurisdiction of the employment tribunals, they also sit with lay members on some of the most important cases. So they are an essential part of our justice system.
Another question for you. Are there any misconceptions around your roles when people meet you and think, oh, it must be like what it's on the telly? What are some of the most common misconceptions you've had in your roles?
That I'm not a man. I still get addressed as sir and letters to me because people assume that I should be a bloke.
Yeah, I'm quite often mistaken for the usher. Because like Carol, I'm a single judge court, which means I've had quite a lot of management responsibilities as well. So I'm often seen out in the public areas, and people will sometimes wander into court if I'm in court and I'm there doing some work, and they'll sort of assume that I'm the usher and say, coming in, I'm sure he's busy, but we'll be in a minute.
I've had that conversation.
Yeah.
What's the job like? I get that a lot.
Yeah. There's a huge misconception that most judges are men, and they assume, so most people, they come into court and see me, assume that I'm the usher or some sort of member of staff and ask me when the male judge will be ready, which is quite amusing, really, in 2021.
But I think things have changed a lot though, because I think I was one of the very few women when I started, but I think we're about half now in the tribunals, probably about a third in the Crown Courts, I'm not sure. But it has changed an awful lot. And I think in the profession, certainly in the solicitor's profession, I think we've now got more women qualifying than men as solicitors. I don't know quite how that translates all the way through, but it's surprising that those old views still hold good, and it's really important to make sure people don't think that the legal profession hasn't changed, because it can put off, maybe some of the people watching today who are thinking about joining the legal profession or thinking about it even for the first time. You want to encourage really good, bright people who care about access to justice to join the judiciary.
There's a real push now as well that the current Lord Chief Justice, who's sort of the most senior judge in the country, recognises that people of talent come from all backgrounds and all communities. And we want to say to everybody, there are lots of misconceptions about judges, but we come from every walk of life. And it doesn't matter what your sexuality is, what your gender is, where you went to school, where you grew up. If you have the talent and the ability, the judiciary wants you. If you've ever seen a programme called Judge John Dee, that might be a bit old for some of your viewers. There is a misconception that we sort of run around in our robes doing all sorts of inappropriate things. There's yet to be a programme with a lawyer in that I haven't got really angry with because it's shown them doing something that's wildly inappropriate. And I saw an advert for a new programme with Bryan Cranston in called Your Honour. Yeah. And I dread to imagine what there's going to be in that, and people will assume that judges get up to.
Do you have people asking if they can approach the bench? You said, no, go and sit back down.
We're just normal people. I went to local comprehensive. I think Debbie did as well.
Yeah, I did as well. Yeah,
normal people with normal lives and normal hobbies. And that's what we want you to know. We don't belong to this society that has a secret handshake and we all went to one school and university.
And we're not all old as well. I think that's a presumption that I've certainly faced, is that, magistrates tend to be just all old white men. Absolutely not. I'm evidence of it, but also there are many other young judges and magistrates, even students like myself. So it is becoming a lot more diverse.
I'm glad to pick that up. I was about to mention that, so that's good.
Well, sorry, I think it's changed because I was in Coventry Magistrates Court the other day, as you are, and I was looking at some pictures from the 70s of the magistrates bench in Coventry in the West Midlands, and the bench was really diverse then. So something was being done, like Ibrahim says, about wanting to contribute towards the community, and that seems to have fallen away. And then it did just become very sort of like retired white men who'd got the time to contribute. And I really hope that seeing people like Ibrahim, and we have magistrates where I sit as well, that's changing, because it's certainly changing. I think the three of us, Carol, Sarah and I, are a good example that it's changing for the judiciary. That it is the case. I went to university in 95 or 96, I can't remember. And I was the first year that there were more women than men doing the law degree. And it has changed, and Sarah's absolutely right, that people from all sorts of backgrounds just went to the local comp, went to university. I think people are always surprised that I had to work all the way through university because my parents didn't have lots of money.
Me too.
Yeah. And
me as well. Miss Selfridge.
Yeah. And
pubs, bars.
You would have got a discount, Carol, at least.
Oh, I was slickly dressed, don't you worry.
I did Quick Save, which was like the Lidl of its day as well.
Oh, that is hilarious, because I did a pizza place. I had a job when I was at university. I lived in lodgings with this lady, and I used to look out, and we're still friends now, which is a real sort of boost in my life. Bonus. Used to look after her daughter. I used to work in a pizza place Friday and Saturday night, and I used to work at Argos in between lectures. And I think people assume that we've never been in the situation that they are. So like I deal with a lot of housing cases, and people have got into difficulties and they've not been able to pay their rent, and they come along and they may have even made some daft decisions about what they've done with their money. And they sort of get a bit defensive that, well, you wouldn't know what it's like. Well, actually, yeah, I would, because I know what it's like to be brought up in a household where there wasn't very much money. Then I was a student, and then a trainee solicitor earning next to nothing. I still worked in a pub at weekends when I was a trainee solicitor to earn extra money. And I do think that people don't think that we have had those previous struggles, because we are paid now, and like Ibrahim, and it's a good wage. So they assume that we don't know what it's like for them. And one of the reasons that I wanted to be a judge was because I felt that people deserved to be judged by somebody who did understand some of those issues, some of those social struggles. Because some of the judges that I'd appeared in front of, like Carol said, clearly didn't have any understanding about what it might be like. So I think that it is important to challenge stereotypes and say you can be a judge whatever your background.
If we don't challenge stereotypes, we miss out on an incredible pool of talent. Judges should be representative of the communities that come to them. It shouldn't be one type of person judging their community. And we want people to know that we come from all sorts of different backgrounds. So it's a really good question that Kaylee's asked. If we don't challenge stereotypes, we miss out on an enormous pool of talent that could be doing incredible work, not just in the law, in all walks of life. And we're not allowing people to develop and achieve their full potential if we don't bust these myths and stereotypes.
But I think part of busting the myths and stereotypes is to see people who come from a range of backgrounds doing the thing that you are interested in. And I think for probably us, when we were growing up, you didn't see people who looked like you. And so the unspoken implication then, never spoken, is that this was not for you. And just like you both did, I didn't come from a moneyed background, and so I earned a living making killer Mai Tais at cocktail bars and selling, flogging off lovely frocks to people, and I did whatever it took to be able to pay my way. And you just learn to balance those things because it's important to you, and you can see that you're going to have a better life and a more interesting life if you put the time in. And I do hope that people are encouraged to reach for things that might not be obviously meant for them, but there's no reason why you shouldn't. So not just the law, but fantastic engineers and all sorts of things.
Someone once asked me why I didn't want to be a hairdresser because I was a woman. And can I say that having cut my support bubbles hair during lockdown, I've always wanted to have a go. I am not good at it, and that is one reason I'm glad I didn't listen to that person.
Folks, we've got another. Oh, sorry, go on, Debbie.
I was just going to say as well, I think that these sorts of things are really good because I don't know about the others, but growing up, the only people that I knew were my family and my parents' friends and my school friends. I didn't know anyone who had a professional role, and so I couldn't, hear from them say you may well have had judges who came from the same background, but I didn't know any of them or hear about them or have access to them. Whereas at least with things like this, hopefully, if there are young people watching now and you look around and you don't know anyone who's a professional and you don't know anyone who's a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, you can say, but it doesn't matter because I can be the first one.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we all were.
Yeah.
Someone's just got a question there saying, is law a good career for someone who sometimes struggles academically and who didn't do that well in their GCSEs? Well, I would say yes. If you are hardworking, if you are curious, if you are interested in different arguments and debates and how the law works and how politics works and how the executive works and how that's all brought together, hard work takes you a long way, and everybody struggles along the way. Not everybody passes every single exam or passes every exam with the grade that they want, but certainly if you're tenacious, you can do it. And if you have a law degree, it opens up all sorts of doors. You don't have to become a solicitor or a barrister or later on a judge. There's all sorts of other ways that lawyers are used in the community.
And can we say that you don't have to have a law degree to be a lawyer? The academic route isn't for everyone. There are routes in where you can become a legal apprentice in a law firm, or you can become a legal executive, where you basically get training on the job, and it's a job you can go into straight from school, and you can work in a law firm, and they will train you up whilst you do it. But there are lots of jobs in law as well. You don't just have to be a solicitor or a barrister. So a lot of law firms employ investigators, they employ IT people, marketing people. There are a whole load of support services that assist lawyers. So as an industry, it's fascinating, and there are lots of different routes into it. So don't just think that you have to have great exam results and a law degree.
And
Well,
ultimately,
just on that,
I'll just what Judge Venn said, that it's not all about having top academics. From my own experience, I didn't get top academics at GCSE. Certainly no A, well, one A star, and that's it really. So don't worry about having a polished profile academically. Of course, it's important to work hard, and I advise students to just try their best. But certainly now, I think when it comes to applying for graduate jobs, it's not just about having top academics. It's also about having that experience, something that makes you stand out. So I'd say don't worry too much about having the top levels.
That's great advice, folks. Thank you. I was just going to ask. I'm going to quickly ask a question just related on that one, Debbie, and then I'll come back to you. So we had a really good conversation there around sort of social mobility and backgrounds, and making sure your present situation isn't determining what your future can possibly be. What's your advice to a young person who's, you've got a disadvantaged young person, bad neighbourhood, maybe not the greatest school, but there's something in there that they think, actually, I want to pursue this as a career. What's your advice to them, each of you, to that young person?
For me, I think because that absolutely relates to my position. I come from a BAME background. I'm from a non-traditional, disadvantaged background. Went to a very normal school, and not an area where a lot of people go to university. I'm one of the first in my family to go. I'd say simply is that don't allow these stereotypes to define you. I was actually discouraged at secondary school, I remember, by one tutor who said that don't really pursue this career barrister because it's tough to get into. It's very expensive. Only very posh people go, and you have to go to all these posh dinners. And I at that moment in my life, I could have made two choices, or there were two choices. I could have followed that advice, and I probably would have done something completely different. Or I could have said, well, actually, I don't really care what you say. I'm going to research into this, and I'm going to forge my own path. And I think that's the better decision, the one that I've taken.
Can we give some practical ideas as well?
Please do.
Write to some of your local solicitors, because there are solicitors everywhere, and write to some local barristers and ask if you can go in and shadow them and get some work experience. It's a good way to see if you think it's an interesting job, but actually it gives you something to talk about. If you apply for a law course, you've got something to explain why you're interested in it and that you've seen it. And if you apply for jobs, you can say, I've looked into it and I've shown I've got some commitment and interest, and I know it's something I want to do. You can walk in outside of lockdown. You can walk into any court and go and sit in the back of a court in a public hearing. At the moment, public hearings are all done on something called the cloud video platform, and you can log into them and you can watch them. You don't even have to leave your bedroom or your living room. You can sit on your iPad and you can watch judges in court and see what happens and see what it's about. So I think taking some real practical steps to show an interest and go and shadow judges even. You can write in and ask to come and sit in court and sit with judges, are really good steps to sort of not just say rejecting the pigeonholing that you might find yourself subject to, but to move things forwards. When I was doing my levels, we lived opposite the local drug dealers who used to sit and watch their they had a great big cathode ray tube TV, which is with a TV with a massive back on it. And they'd shove it into their living room window and sit in their paddling pool in the garden, drinking, watching porn. So that's the background that I came from. And if I can come from that sort of background and be in the position I am in, and any of you can do it as well, it doesn't have to hold you back.
And I didn't have a study room, and so I used to go to the library to study. So you can find ways around to do what you need to do. So I think it's right to actually go into some courts and or log into some courts. If you go on to CourtServe, you'll see the how to get the links, and you can, as you say, you can just watch at home, and it's absolutely fascinating. I would say if you can find an unfair dismissal case anywhere in the country that's 1 day long, you'll see it from beginning, middle and end, and I guarantee you'll be fascinated.
just another one on that. So for any young people, perhaps those who are now sort of graduating from uni and thinking about a law firm to become a trainee solicitor, sending in applications, what's your advice to them? You know, what should be on that application to make them stand out from anybody else?
I think that you've got to make yourself stand out. So I remember when I first started applying for training contracts, which you have to do sort of postgraduate and post to become a solicitor, I had to handwrite all my letters to all the firms. You know, you couldn't email or print stuff off. And I wrote and I said that, you know, I was interested in the law and why, but also I collected dragons. And when somebody wrote back to me, they were like, you know, I think one of the firms in Plymouth or something wrote back and said, I'd love to meet you just to see what sort of dragons you're collecting, because it seems like a bizarre thing to have put in a letter, but it made me stand out. And also, I hand-delivered letters to firms in Birmingham for work experience. And I went in and said to the reception, I don't know who would give this to, but I really want to come and do some work experience. And a couple of days later, I went back in and said, do you remember me? I wanted to do some work experience. And I got chatting to the receptionist, who I think took pity on me. And then they went, I'm going to go and have a word with Steve, and he might have, you know. And they come back, and I got some work experience by doing that. So I managed to be. I think one of the things that you've got to be, if you come from a background that isn't, you know, usual, is be a bit pushy, and to push back at these tutors who say you can't do it, to push back at people who say that, you know, you're not necessarily very academic. If you Google law apprenticeships, as Sarah says, you can enter the profession at all sorts of levels with good academics or not. And if you do a law degree and you decide law's not for you, a couple of years ago, the top 100 women on Radio 4's list, something like 80 out of 100 had a law degree. And the World Health Organization, most of the top people there are lawyers, previous lawyers. Lots of MPs are as well, but I'm not so sure that that's a sort of...
So be careful.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to step into the political arena.
But they are, aren't they? There are lots of MPs who have fortunately got law degrees. But they've decided to go down that route. In other words, it gets you a good job.
But it's like Ibrahim said as well, actually. Having something that makes you a bit different, whether that's volunteering or getting some sort of experience, really helps. I used to mark pupillage application forms, which were applications for people who wanted to be barristers when I was working as a barrister. And everybody had pretty good A-levels and, you know, at least a 2-1 degree. And the people that became interesting were the people who did extra things like debating, mooting, which is making a legal argument in front of somebody who's playing a judge, and volunteering and taking on responsibility in organisations, clubs and societies. So it's having that bit more that shows that you're a rounded person, that you interact well with other people, you can take on a bit of responsibility, and you can show a bit of commitment. And whether that's being chair of a football club that you play for, or it's going out and volunteering, all of those sorts of things. So show great skills that lawyers are going to look for.
Yeah,
I think that
as well. When I was doing the same sort of job in a legal firm, I used to look for people who'd had a part-time job for a long period of time, all the way through A-levels or something, because then they show that they can get up every day, get to school, get to work, show a commitment, deal with people. So a job or a volunteer role that makes you stand out, I agree with Sarah. Like, that's the things that are going to get you forward.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, when you have those sorts of jobs, you come up against all sorts of circumstances that you have to troubleshoot your way through, and you can use those as examples when you do secure interviews. So if that's, you know, if you've been on the helping with an arts organisation or a sports organisation, or just doing a newspaper round, you know, and dealing with grumpy people, you know, how have you dealt with that over the time? And you get all sorts of interaction experience with people, which you can turn to your advantage.
And ultimately, I'd say it's also about having a personality. not just these traditional things like, you know, chairing a club or joining a society, whether it's like Judge Stringer collecting dragons or like beekeeping, you know, anything that really shows that you have a personality and you're going to get on with people. That's going to help.
Excellent. Well, folks, I think I'm going to probably close it on there, because I think that I was going to ask you if you could all sum up with some good advice, and I think you all just have. So that it's been an absolute pleasure to be.
Dragon is still here.
I have my drumsticks at work for practice.
I've learned so much today. Folks, thank you so much for coming on Careers and Coffee. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Blimey, how do I sum that up? So thanks, a huge thank you to all of the judges for joining us today on Careers and Coffee. I've learned so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to all of them. Learned about making sure that your background doesn't determine your future, and also making sure that you stand out on job applications with dragons. So hopefully you've taken something from today's Careers and Coffee. Obviously, tune in next week, 12:30 to 1, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Looking forward to seeing you. Thanks.